Hello and welcome back to the Jack the Ripper case. And so, we've just had the double murder, and the next day the capital wakes up in fear and an angry mob form in Berners Street. And for the first time the Home Office consider offering a financial reward for any evidence leading to the arrest of the Ripper. And on the 1st of October another letter is sent to CNN. You might say, what is the central news group? It's the CNN or the CNA, the Central News Association or Authority. It's an organisation. There's a small office in London, and their job is to collate information from the newspapers and then distribute it back to all the other newspapers. And so they don't produce a newspaper themselves, and that's what made the police so suspicious that a letter was sent to them in the first place. Because normally when people send a letter to a newspaper, they might choose the Telegraph, the Guardian, the Evening Post, the Daily Mail. They don't tend to send it to the central news agencies and authorities, because their only job is to get information from newspapers and then distribute it round. But another letter is sent, and it says, "Thank you for not publishing the Dear Boss letter." The handwriting is the same, and again, it may or may not be from the killer. We'll come back to why they might be genuine, despite the fact that journalists have confessed to it later. Now, on the 16th of October, we're going to meet a man for the first time called Mr. George Lusk. Now, he's president of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. Now, they are a neighbourhood watch scheme. But when we say neighbourhood watch, I don't mean they're looking through net curtains, peering out at whatever might be happening outside their houses. Oh no, this is a serious neighbourhood watch committee. Mr. George Lusk has decided that the police are incompetent and incapable of catching the killer. And he's put a call out for public-spirited men, and he wants them to report to him. He operates out of a pub, and he will then give them an armband, and they are to patrol the streets of London carrying knives. It is not illegal in that time period to walk the streets carrying knives. Lots of people did, especially if they were butchers walking to and from work. However, it is a public order nightmare. The police are looking for a man stalking Whitechapel carrying a knife. And Mr. George Lusk has just put hundreds of men on the streets of Whitechapel carrying knives. The police have to waste thousands of hours investigating these public vigilance men, and the killer has almost certainly joined the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. Because why would you not? If you're looking for an excuse to stalk the streets of London with a knife, join an organisation that will ask you to stalk the streets of London with a knife. He'd have turned up, said, "Mr. George Lusk, here I am, I've got a very sharp knife and I know Whitechapel well. Thank you very much, give me an armband." He receives a letter saying, "From hell." And we got that letter on the PowerPoint. And with that letter, in a little cardboard box, is half a human kidney preserved in wine. On the 9th of November, the last of the killings takes place. The murder of Mary Kelly. And it's the only one to be done indoors, which makes some historians think that it was killed by somebody else. There are a series of copycat killings. Every time you have a serial killer, there's a series of copycat killings. However, most historians think that these 5 women were killed by the same person. And so Mary Kelly, and remember the same name as the earlier victim had gave. Now, she lived at 13 Miller's Court. And let's take ourselves through her last hours on this earth. Now, it's 8 p.m. 2 friends see her alive. She may then have gone drinking at the 10 Bells pub with Elizabeth Foster. 11 o'clock, very drunk, with a respectable looking man with a dark moustache in the Britannic pub. At 11:45 p.m, an elderly neighbour sees her return to her house in Miller's Court with a stout man, 35 or 36 years old, 5'5", badly dressed, with a blotched face, carroty moustache, side whiskers. That's the most extraordinary description. I got our students to try and describe their own teachers. And bear in mind, these teachers had been teaching them for at least half a year, in some cases 18 months. I could only get 3 or 4 words. And then I got the another group of children to try and guess who was being described. If you're watching, I've got some bad news for you. The child that was asked to describe me, the description apparently also matched Mr. Danaher, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Calvert. There was a whole variety of teachers suggested for my description. I'm not necessarily sure how I felt about that, but bear in mind that our children see us in good lighting conditions regularly, that there was a limited number of people in which they could describe, and they did a bad job. This elderly woman at 11:45 at night has given us a very good description of this man. Now, maybe she had a bit better to do with her time, but remember, people make bad witnesses. A lot of this is probably made up. Now, she says, "Good night" at the door. Not the elderly woman, that is. Mary Kelly says good night to the man at the door. She says, "Good night, I'm going to sing." And she then went into the house alone and could be heard singing a song, "A Violet from a Mother's Grave." And at some point while in that house, she ate a meal of fish and potatoes. We know that because it was in her stomach when she was killed. Now at 12:30 at night, Catherine Pickett, who lived just above her, is disturbed by the singing. Now she wants to go down the stairs and complain because she's fed up of the noise coming from Mary Kelly's flat. But her husband tells her to leave it, saying that she's already suffered enough. Now at 2 in the morning, Mary Kelly leaves the house to find money. She goes up to a man called George Hutchinson. She asks him for 6 pence, but he has nothing on him, he says. She then walks up. However, George Hutchinson watches her walk up to another man. This other man put his hand upon her shoulder. He said something, and they both laughed. Now, she then was heard to say, "All right." And he then asks, "You will be all right for what I've told you?" And they then walk off together. He's carrying a parcel. Now, that's significant because eyewitness descriptions of a man at close to the area of the 3rd and 4th killings had also seen a suspect carrying a parcel. Now, as they walk past the streetlights by the Queen's Head pub, Hutchinson sees this man clearly. But again, we must be suspicious about how accurate this description is. He says the man is pale, with a slight moustache turned up at the corners, dark hair, dark eyes, bushy eyebrows, Jewish. Not sure how, but remember, people see what they want to see, and a lot of people didn't like Jewish people at this time period, so we may guess that George Hutchinson is an anti-Semite. He said he was 35 or 36 years old, 5'6" or 5'7", with a soft felt hat, a massive gold chain with a large red stone on the end. Now they go off together and they kiss. And she says, "All right, my dear, come along, you'll be comfortable." Now at 4 in the morning, Elizabeth Proter is awakened by her kitten, Diddles, and she hears a cry of, "Oh, murder!" But she says that hearing that kind of cry is common in her area. Murder isn't common, remember, but maybe the cry of "oh, murder" is. And she thinks nothing of it. So what a nice neighbour to have. Now, that cry is also heard by a Sarah Lewis in a different flat. Neither do anything about it. Now, at 10:45 the next morning, the landlord, John McCarthy, sends Thomas Banger to collect her rent, and he sees through the window the body. Now, they've got a locked room with the evidence intact. A gift for the investigation force. The police wait several hours outside the door because they have summoned 2 bloodhounds, Barnaby and Bungalow, and they want to use the bloodhounds to track the scent of the killer, who must have been the last person to leave that house, through the streets of London. But the 2 bloodhounds never arrive because the police had failed to pay the owner of the bloodhound the last time they had hired them. And so they waste several hours outside that door waiting for bloodhounds who never arrive. So then they decide to smash down the door. Strangely, however, 2 witnesses swear blind that they'd seen the murdered victim after that point. after she must have been dead, which lets you know how reliable witnesses are. And so a Caroline Maxwell had claimed to see Mary Kelly at 8:30 in the morning, and Maxine Lewis claims to have seen the murdered victim at 10 that morning. Both of them say they saw her drinking in the pub The Horn of Plenty. Remember, there aren't any strict laws on opening hours at this time. They were introduced in the First World War. Pubs could open when they wanted at this stage. However, the police surgeon is absolutely adamant that she was already dead by then, and so the police ignore those witness statements.